Welcome to IAS project. In this video, let's talk about Samaveda. In our previous video, we have talked about some of the basics of later Vedic period. Now, let's talk about Vedic literature. First, let's try to understand what is the meaning of the word Veda. We know that the word Veda comes from Vid, and Vid means knowledge, or we can also call it as education. And we also know that we have four Vedas. They are nothing but Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda. So basically these are the four Vedas that we have. However, each of these Vedas is further divided into four parts. For example, if we consider Rig Veda first, then within Rig Veda we have Rig Veda Samhitas, we have Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads that are attached to Rig Veda. Similarly, in the case of Samaveda also we have four parts, and also in Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda we have four parts like Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. So whenever we say the word Veda, we are generally meaning all these four entities. So in the coming lectures, we will discuss each of these entities one by one. We have already talked about Rig Veda Samhita during our early Vedic period lectures. Now in this lecture, we will talk about Samaveda Samhita, and later we will talk about Yajur Veda Samhita and Atharva Veda Samhita. Afterwards, we will also learn about Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. So all these four parts are basically considered as a part of Shruti literature in Hinduism. What do we mean by Shruti literature? Shruti literature is basically such kind of religious literature which has not been learned, but it has been directly heard and then it was composed. When we are using the word heard here, please do not take it in a literal sense, because it should actually mean the word inspired. So what happened was, basically the rishis and munis got inspired by this universe and then they composed this Shruti literature. When we say universe, we are basically saying Brahman. Brahman is nothing but the cosmic entity. If you want to simply understand the concept of Brahman, then you can say that Brahman is everything in this universe. So it includes both animate objects and also inanimate objects. It includes living things and it also includes non-living things. So everything in the universe is basically considered as Brahman. If you consider it as a god, then that god would be nothing but the Brahman. So the Vedic poets and Vedic sages basically got inspired by universe, or we can say they got inspired by the Brahman, and then they composed these literatures. That is why all this literature is basically called as Shruti literature. We also have what is known as Smriti literature. We will talk more about Smriti literature at the end of this video. But for now, just remember that there are two kinds of literature in Hinduism. They are nothing but Shruti literature and Smriti literature. And the Vedic literature is basically Shruti literature. It is not Smriti literature. Moreover, we can also classify Vedic literature into two types. The first type is simply called as Karma Khanda, and the second type is called as Jnana Khanda. So by observing the word karma here, you can simply note that this is the portion of Vedic literature that deals with action or rituals, because karma simply means work or action. That is why the Karma Khanda part of Vedic literature deals with action or rituals, whereas the Jnana Khanda basically deals with knowledge, because Jnana is nothing but knowledge. So we said that Vedic literature has these four parts. So within these four parts, basically the Samhitas and Brahmanas are the part of Karma Khanda. So Samhitas and Brahmanas mainly deal with action or rituals, whereas Upanishads are basically the Jnana Khanda of Vedic literature. It means that Upanishads deal with knowledge. And we also have another part which is nothing but Aranyakas, and Aranyakas form the link between Karma Khanda and Jnana Khanda. I hope this is clear to you, because Aranyakas have both Karma Khanda as well as Jnana Khanda. Since in the sequential order, first Samhitas came, then Brahmanas, then Aranyakas, and later Upanishads. So initially there was Karma Khanda and later there was Jnana Khanda, and Aranyakas basically form the link between Karma Khanda and Jnana Khanda. So we know that early Vedic literature basically contains the Rig Veda Samhita. Within Rig Veda, we have four parts. They are nothing but Samhita, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. So Rig Veda Samhita basically is called as early Vedic literature. Whereas later Vedic literature means Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharva Veda. Please note that I am using the word Veda here. So I am meaning all the four parts of these three Vedas. So along with Samaveda Samhita, Yajurveda Samhita and Atharva Veda Samhita, later Vedic literature also includes Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads that are associated with these three Veda Samhitas. So each Veda has its own Brahmanas, its own Aranyakas and also its own Upanishads. And all these three are basically ancillary to the Veda Samhita. We will learn about some of the important Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads that are associated with each Veda Samhita. But please remember that the names of these Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads are not important from the point of view of exam. I will tell you one or two important Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Otherwise, you don't need to know about the names of all Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. You just need to understand the concept that every Veda is divided into four parts. They are nothing but Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishads. The last three, that is the Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads, are basically called as ancillary texts of Veda Samhita. So let's talk about Samaveda Samhita. We know that within the Rig Veda Samhita, we have almost 1028 hymns, or we can call these as Suktas. So some of these hymns and Suktas were taken in the Samaveda. And moreover, when these hymns and Suktas were taken, these hymns and Suktas were set to tune. When I say set to tune, basically I am saying that they were made into melodies. Now, what is melody? Let's not go into technical terms. Let's try to understand melody with a simple example. Alright, consider two cases, okay? In the first case, let's say, for example, there is Ravish Kumar and this person is reading the news. In the second example, let's say there is Shreya Ghoshal. We know that Shreya Ghoshal is a famous singer and she is one of the best singers out there. If you compare the words of Ravish Kumar and let's say Shreya Ghoshal, for the sake of example, let's say Ravish Kumar and Shreya Ghoshal are both reading the same text. But Shreya Ghoshal's talent is that she can make the text into a melody, which means that when Shreya Ghoshal is going to read the text, she can simply make the text in the form of a song. Whenever you hear the melody that is made by Shreya Ghoshal, you will feel mesmerized. But at the same time, if let's say the Ravish Kumar is reading the same text, probably you won't feel mesmerized because Ravish Kumar is not making a melody out of the text, whereas Shreya Ghoshal is making a melody out of the text. So this is the difference between Rig Veda and Samaveda. Most of the prayers that are contained in Samaveda are actually taken from Rig Veda. However, in the Samaveda, these prayers were set to tune. That is why these prayers were made into melodies. And when the prayers of Rig Veda were set to tune and made into melodies, this became a modified collection. And this modified collection is called as Samaveda Samhita. I hope you understand this. In the first case, Ravish Kumar was just reading out the words. But in the second case, what Shreya Ghoshal did was, she converted the same words into melodies. That is why when you hear Shreya Ghoshal reading out the same words in the form of melody, it is very pleasing. So Rig Veda Samhita basically has a collection of 1810 melodies. You do not need to remember the number, but please try to remember that Samaveda was not entirely a new thing. Samaveda has most of the prayers that are taken from Rig Veda. Not all the prayers, but most prayers are taken from Rig Veda. But Rig Veda was only containing the prayers. The prayers in the Rig Veda were not set to tune. Whereas in the Samaveda, the same prayers were set to tune. That is why they became melodies. And this modified collection is called as Samaveda Samhita. So Samaveda Samhita is basically a new entity. If we talk about the theme of Samaveda, then it is nothing but worship and devotion. It is simply called as Upasana. Upasana also means meditation, okay? Moreover, Samaveda is the shortest of all four Vedas, whereas Rig Veda is considered as the largest of all Vedic literature. Moreover, since Samaveda contains melodies and music, it also contains the Drupada Raga. Drupada Raga was basically the most important genre of Hindustani classical music. So let's try to understand what is Hindustani and what is classical music. Whenever we say music, it is generally of two types, okay? The first one has standards in it and the second one does not have standards. So when we say a music has standards, it simply means that there are specific rules to be followed in composing such kind of music. So such kind of standard music is basically called as classical music. So classical music basically has rules and standards that have to be adhered. In case of India, we basically have two kinds of classical music. The first type is called as Hindustani classical music and the second type is called as Carnatic classical music. Hindustani classical music is mainly prevalent in northern India, whereas Carnatic classical music is mainly prevalent in southern India. So this is the meaning of the word classical music and Hindustani classical music. Hindustani classical music not only has elements that are derived from Samaveda and let's say Natya Shastra, but they also have elements that are taken from Persian culture. Persian culture mainly because of Islamic invasions into India. But the Carnatic music is very pure compared to Hindustani classical music. Hindustani classical music has Persian elements, but the Carnatic classical music does not have Persian elements and it is indigenous to India. Okay, now there is another word here. What is Raga? You will learn about all of this in art and culture. So I am going to give you a brief information and mostly I will give you non-technical information. Okay. So for any music to be called as Raga, it basically needs to contain some notes. Okay. What do we mean by notes? For example, we have notes like Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Da, Ni, Sa. So these are basically the notes of music. So if you remove the last Sa, because you already have a Sa here, you are having 7 primary or fundamental notes. These 7 fundamental notes are also called as Swaras. Okay. These are basically called as Sapta Swaras or 7 Swaras. So by making a combination of these 7 Swaras, for example, Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, simply becomes a 5 Swara Raga. Similarly, you can use all the 7 Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Da, Ni, Sa. It becomes a Raga. So this is what Raga simply means. It can contain more than 7 also by using a repeated Swara once again. So Raga is basically a combination of Swaras. And in the case of Indian music, Ragas basically give what is called as color and emotion to the music. So the Drupada Raga basically has its origins in the Samaveda. And Drupada Raga is a primary raga in the Hindustani classical music. So that was about Raga. The term Raga basically refers to melodic framework for improvisation in case of Indian classical music. Please note that the word Raga is not used in the case of Western music or let's say European classical music. It is only used in the case of Indian classical music. Please note this. This is very important. And the last point here is that the Upaveda of Samaveda is Gandharva Veda. Gandharva Veda is basically the knowledge that is associated with music and dance forms. Let's try to understand what is Upaveda. So the term Upaveda basically refers to applied knowledge. In the case of common sense, Upaveda is basically used to designate subjects of certain technical works. So you can get the meaning of the word here, applied knowledge and technical work. This means that this Upaveda is not a part of Shruti literature. We know that Shruti literature is such kind of literature which has been composed by sages and rishis who were inspired by the universe. So Shruti literature was a literature that has been heard by the sages and rishis. But the Upaveda is an applied knowledge or let's say technical work. That is why it is not a part of Shruti literature. It is actually part of Smriti literature. And what is Smriti literature? It is that kind of literature which has been learnt and then remembered. Please note this. In case of Shruti literature, the word here was heard. So depending on the sources, the type and the list of subjects can differ. That is why we cannot say these and these are Upavedas and these are not Upavedas. For example, if we consider Charanavyahu, then we have Upavedas like Ayurveda, Gandharva Veda, Dhanurveda and Arthashastra. And these Upavedas are basically associated with a particular Veda. For example, Ayurveda, which is basically Indian school of medicine, has been associated with Rig Veda. So this is from the point of view or from the source of Charana Vyuha Sutra. However, other sources say that Ayurveda is actually associated with Atharva Veda. So depending on the source, Upavedas may be associated with different Vedas. However, generally Ayurveda is the Upaveda that is associated with Rig Veda. So in the case of second example, we have Gandharva Veda, which is nothing but the applied knowledge of music and dance. And Gandharva Veda is associated with Samaveda. Similarly, we have Dhanur Veda, which is nothing but the applied knowledge of archery. The word Dhanu here actually means bow. So Dhanur Veda is the Upaveda that is associated with Yajur Veda. And finally, Charana Vyuha Sutra states that Arthashastra is the Upaveda that is associated with Atharva Veda. We will talk more about Arthashastra when we talk about Mauryas. So Upaveda is basically different from Veda. Upaveda is the applied knowledge and it is part of Smriti literature, whereas Vedas were part of Shruti literature. I hope this is clear. Please like and subscribe. You can download this presentation from our Telegram channel. The name of the channel is IAS Project. You can find the link for this channel in the description section below. Thank you.